Welcome back to Eyewitness News. Our legal counsel, Charlie O'Hara, in the studio today. It is 8:30. Give us a call, 436-1212, if you have a question. Charlie, good to see you again today.
Good morning.
All right, good morning to you. And we do have some calls on the line. We're going to go ahead and get to that first one. Go ahead, caller. What's your question for us today?
Yes, I have a question on that smoking in the apartment building. That I thought they had a grandfather clause that if you was in before that took place, that, you know, you didn't have to. They got rules now. Is that still in effect, that grandfather clause?
Well, that I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. If you're referring to a law, whatever the law says obviously controls. If you're referring to just an agreement that you have with the apartment complex and they've changed their rules, that would be governed by your lease. If your lease was for a year and it said you could smoke when that lease was up, then obviously the new lease would come into effect, or the new rules would come into effect. So if it's an agreement between you and the landlord, it's one thing. If you're talking about a law that the government's passed, the government can do a lot of things when they pass laws, so they can change a lot of things, as we all know.
Okay, so if you're living in an apartment complex and they say, hey, listen, once you sign a new lease, no more smoking, you have to follow that lease agreement or move out.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Charlie.
Okay.
And earlier today we were talking about a coach and teacher who had pleaded no contest to a charge. And, you know, we were talking in the studio, what does no contest mean? Because you're not pleading guilty, but you're not saying you're innocent, or are you? So can you explain that to us?
Well, basically what you're saying is you're not contesting the charges. In other words, you're saying, I understand what the charges are, I'm not going to contest them, you can take the proof, the judge can take the proof and find me guilty based on the facts, but I'm not admitting I did anything. The reason you usually do that as a lawyer is so that someone can't be sued. And what that is, that's not an admission in court, so if they're going to sue you for money, they would have to actually prove the facts. Okay. You haven't admitted them. Okay,
we're talking about a civil suit, something like that.
Now sometimes there's other reasons you do it. It's done for plea agreement reasons, maybe the person's really not guilty of what they're pleading no contest to, but they're guilty of something else, and the attorney, the defense attorney and the prosecutor kind of get a legal fiction and have a no contest plea. There's a lot of reasons they do it, but the primary reasons for the civil cases.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Okay, we do have another caller on the line. We're going to go ahead and get to that call. Go ahead, what's your question for Charlie today?
Are you speaking to me?
Yes, go right ahead. What's your question?
Okay. I'm curious. I've got a situation here involving adverse possession of property. I bought a piece of property 2 or 3 years ago, and I made a mistake of not having it surveyed until 2 years later after my health got better, and when the lines were actually established. And it's an older complex, or older subdivision here in town. And the gentleman that lives next door claims that there's about 700 square foot of it that's outside our fence that was put in prior to my moving in, or prior to my buying the place. And he claims he owns it because of an adverse possession. He says he's taken care of it minimally, and admittedly for 15 years or so. And my attorney has researched it quite extensively, and he's not too sure that we can win the case. I'm wondering what you think about it.
Well, I sure don't want to give over the TV an opinion that would be different than the attorney that you've paid to give that opinion. I think you need to follow your attorney's advice. Any attorney that's telling you the truth is going to tell you that they're not sure they're going to win any case, because when you go to court, we never know for sure what's going to happen. And usually when you go to court, the other side has an attorney too, and they're arguing the law and the facts, so we never know a for sure decision on anything. But I would listen to the attorney, and the attorney will probably tell you whether that attorney thinks it's worth going to trial over. If they think it's worth going to trial, then you ought to do it. You ought to follow your attorney's advice. That's why you hire him, that's why you pay him. You need to follow the attorney you've hired and follow his advice. If you don't like his advice and you want other advice, you can always go to another attorney. But if you're paying somebody that's been trained in the law, I'd follow their advice. Okay,
they're looking out for your interests, and obviously
they should be,
paying
yes.
them. Okay, thank you, Charlie.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Okay.
Have a great week.